In this episode of the Talking HealthTech podcast, we're bringing you a session recorded live during our winter summit in front of a virtual audience where we dive into integrating health tech ecosystems. This session was supported by THT Plus Partners Best Practice Software and features expert insights into the challenges and opportunities of managing integrations across different regions and healthcare systems. So in the next few episodes here on the podcast, you'll hear more insights from our winter summits as well. So if you're keen to join our next Talking HealthTech Virtual Summit live, registration is free, and we're gearing up for our spring summit, which is happening in November 2024. So subscribe to our newsletter at talkinghealthtech.com/newsletter, and you can be the first to know all the details. Collaboration starts with a conversation. Team Health Tech, let's make it happen. Health tech ecosystems are evolving rapidly, and integration with clinical information systems is increasingly vital. This session will bring together health tech vendors to discuss how these integrations are managed and unpack the challenges and best practices on how to navigate these increasingly diverse landscapes. Welcome to session 1 of the Talking Health Tech Winter Summit 2024. Special thanks to Best Practice Software who are bringing you this session today about integrating health tech ecosystems. On the panel, Chris Smeed, CEO of Cubiko, Phil Loya, Lead Business Developer and Business Strategist at Oracle Health, Paul Main, Lead Architect for HealthLink and Clam Williams, and Kaye Hocking, Chief Product Officer at Alcidion. Prior to this session, we ran a flash poll on LinkedIn to find out what's the biggest challenge in integrating health tech ecosystems. 48% of people said data interoperability, 27% said stakeholder collaboration, 15% of people thought technology infrastructure, and 9% of people think regulatory compliance is the biggest challenge in integrating health tech ecosystems. Let's go to the panel to find out more. Now, just a quick update in relation to who will be speaking in this session, because Paul was a last-minute change for this one as he's not able to participate. But instead, we have Danielle, and we do have a lovely avatar for you, Danielle. We just didn't get time to add it in. And I've put snow all over Chris's face, so I'm very sorry about that. But,
I just want to see my shiny head reflect the snow. Is that right? Yeah, great. Buzzing up for the day, mate.
Down, that's fine. I can move you here. I just thought it was funny. It's great to have everyone here. As best practice are supporting this session. If it's not a conversation about interoperability and the vendor community, if Danielle Bancroft from Best Practice Software is not involved. So thank you, Danielle, for jumping in at the very last minute. And you tried to stay away from this session, but we just couldn't keep her away.
I did. I tried to give someone else an opportunity, but I guess, it's what it is. Here we are.
You need to be part of it. So, but looking forward to speaking to Paul again soon, and hope things are okay. So, now I'm gonna kick us off. So for those that that aren't aware, we're talking about the interoperability space, and it's not a conversation that is one that we're unfamiliar with within the health tech ecosystem, and it's one that people shared on the survey too. That the biggest challenge they find is integrating systems is interoperability. So in kind of setting the scene, as we've got strong representation from the vendor crowd here, I might ask each of you, we'll go around, and perhaps we'll start with Chris. Why not? He's right next to me here, and provide us a bit of context and insights into, I guess, the importance of integration in the stuff that you do, because you do wear a few hats. So over to you, Chris.
No, awesome. I think it's really key, and I guess probably saying the obvious here, but like my first little love is Cubiko. Cubiko is a tool that pulls data and displays insights. So if we can't get data, we don't have a lot of display. So it makes it a pretty boring and useless product. I was a practice manager for many years and was like installing add-ons and doing things on my servers to try and get data out of them. So when I was good enough to start working in the space and doing things, I quickly realized that the importance of integration was key, because without that source data, it wasn't useful. And then data can come from many different sources. So we gather from lots of different places, lots of different vendors. Everyone has a different way of doing it, but it all adds value. And it's not always in the health silo as well. From those sort of problems in trying to get data, that's where Halo Connect came from. So it's a company that does API integrations now into Best Practice, ZenMed, and Dental for Windows. So we're doing some APIs and some also interoperability layers in that space. So, but for me, in my core business, Cubiko, without data, we're nothing. So we need it on that interoperability layer.
Of course, thank you. And sorry, I should have mentioned too, as one of the esteemed co-hosts of the Medicubes podcast, which is part of the podcast network, we've got to give that a push as well. Perhaps vote for that in the podcast awards that are
super episode coming this Friday about the changes to chronic disease management. So if you're worried about that and trying to get to the bottom of it, this Friday, super good episode coming. What a plug! It's like I've done this before. I don't know.
CDM, important one, but not the point of this conversation here. Maybe it'll tell you. Kaye, over to you.
Oh, thanks, Pete. And Chris, I'm probably going to sound like I'm going to echo quite a few of the things you just said, but in our business, the same. Our flagship product, My Precision Fire Native platform, was built based on interoperability. If we couldn't get data from other systems and then present it in the sort of intuitive interface that we provided, it wasn't going to do anything. So it's key to what we're doing, and continues to be that way. We're fortunate enough in our company as well too, is that we've got quite a significant domain expertise in the interoperability space. And I quite often say to people, like, while we love to adhere to standards and we'd all like to talk, in our instance, fire, for example, I've not yet seen any interoperability problem that our team couldn't solve. May not always be the most elegant way, but we will make sure that we can get that data, because that is, as your poll said, Pete, the data exchange is the key to everything, really. So yeah, it's our daily at Alcidion. It's a huge focus for us.
Excellent. Thank you for that context. Now, the benefits of being a virtual event is that we can pull people from around the world. And while Phil's normally quite local here in Australia, you're joining us from somewhere, Malaysia.
Malaysia. Yes. Hello from.
Worried that am I allowed to give away your location? But I realize your role is not like some kind of secret service.
from somewhat sunny Kuala Lumpur. So hello. I didn't really think of being backlit. So maybe at some point I'll drop the shade. I didn't think of that. That's my fault, not Peter's.
If there's one place to drop the shade, it's within a Talking HealthTech.
See? Love it.
That's gonna be the quote from this session, isn't it?
Yeah, I totally locked it up. Wasn't even expecting it, and then it came. That's fantastic. Thanks, Pete. And yeah, Kaye, Chris, I agree 100%. So I think, all of us are kind of, we're beyond the time frame where we think of one system being the end all be all for everything, right? And so, of course, I'm from Oracle Health. I came in from the Cerner acquisition. Yes, we're a big EMR provider. Yes, we want to be the system of record for a lot of things, but there's no one system for everyone, for every single use case, for every single purpose. And interoperability is required no matter what. Whether it's a PAS system, a LIS, a RIS, device connectivity, and now we start thinking about Smart on Fire and really niche products that are supporting specific specialties. And that didn't make financial sense when I had to do a one-by-one integration, right? And had to go from system to system and sell it, and each time do something different, right? And so these interoperability standards are starting to help us create situations where there's enough commonality that you can start to get some economies of scale, and you can create support for something really niche and share data and have new use cases, and do that and build a business off of it, right? You can build a nice business from that perspective. So, interoperability is absolutely key. Being part of the ecosystem is very important. The clinicians do expect a consolidated workflow, and we want to try and give it to them. But we know that I don't have enough engineers. No one has enough engineers to cover every single use case for every single clinician in every single country of the world, right? That's just not happening.
No, exactly. And the I think about the attendees here at the Talking HealthTech Winter Summit, and a good portion of them are either clinicians that are battling that workflow of different systems to log into. Hopefully, it's a seamless process, but or perhaps it's a seamless process at the front end. Then when it gets to the devil's in the detail, when you actually need to do some further, and I think we might touch into that in a minute. But in terms of those systems of record, it is great that we've got that point that you raised, Phil, around the EMR being that kind of place where everything might land. But that's similar in the hospital space, but similar, of course, in the general practice side. So Danielle, you would have a lot of specific tools that might require that kind of connection or integration in with best practice software. So it's great to have you on this discussion today. And I imagine there's everything that everyone said you already wholeheartedly agree with.
100%. You can't be everything to everyone. So there's a couple of factors that feed into it. Ultimately, you have a client base that all practice differently. Everyone's not the same. So what their needs are and how they treat their patients differ slightly. So the tools that they utilize to back that are going to be different across different practices, across different areas and sectors of the health system. Increasingly, there is multidisciplinary, and it's a great word to use, but at the same time, that also means transitions of care change and alter very quickly. No patient's the same. So their transition and journey across the actual care ecosystem is different. And that's where it's you can't be everything to everyone. Like you can't just build one Uber system that does everything. It's not possible to deliver the kind of innovation and support and technology for our customers at that rate. So being able to integrate and have a partnership and offer those additional tools that our customers can pick is absolutely pivotal. But it's not just about integration. An ecosystem is bigger than just integrating one system. How do we actually innovate at scale? How do we allow new technology advancements to be included? How do we incorporate tools much quicker for our customers and allow that change to happen with the way that the healthcare is changing from being reactive to proactive? Means we need to move faster. And that's where I think ecosystems come in and the approach changes. It's not just about bespoke integrations that have to be installed at the site. It's how do we actually offer those tools quicker in an ecosystem that can continue to evolve.
Yeah. Well, I think about from my own experience too, in being one of those, representing a technology vendor that a few of them that would require the connection in with the practice management system. And if you're in the GP world, kind of it's different to, just connecting all of your different CRMs and things from a non-healthcare view, where you can just connect it in with Zapier or a provider and just it magically flows, and put your API keys in and away you go. And I speak to many within our community in the broader ecosystem that might have created a tool. They're like, oh, I just need the API key for this so I can connect the two things together. And then like, oh, okay, it's not working. And one challenge, Chris, is that, there's in the GP world, a lot of stuff is still on-prem. So the cloud solutions are increasingly available and becoming super interesting. But a lot of it is each computer has its own instance of the practice management system installed. And it's kind of like, well, from experience, like I don't think anyone's going to argue with the fact that all the systems need to be able to connect with each other. And I don't want this to be like everyone saying, yes, I agree, because everyone's like, cool, that's like, we've been talking about that for 150 years. But then where I find this conversation drops usually is, well, as soon as we've got the standards, or as soon as we've got this, or like, let's wait for the powers that be, and then it's like we'll be done. But like, what can we do in the meantime, Chris?
Well, look, I think and having Danielle here is perfect for this question. I'm actually kind of sick of people saying that on-prem is a reason not to have interoperability. I think it's just stop saying it, because it's not true. We're going to get in trouble for saying that. But we've built with BP and ZMed and Dental for Windows and lots of other on-prem PMSs a set of APIs that let you interact and do everything you need to do from a data interaction transfer kind of complex point of view with a REST-based and FHIR-based API. So I think using on-prem as a reason not to do something is no longer an excuse. I know that when we used to have to go and get software manually installed on a server and get Cubiko spun up, it took me about 2 weeks to onboard someone. Using Halo and APIs, we can now do it in about 20 minutes. A tick of a button, it happens. So I think the narrative around on-prem being a blocker is just not true, as long as the on-prem practice management systems are going on the journey as much as everyone else, and they seem to be. So I think that challenge is done. I think it's exciting. It's also has to be all overlaid with that layer of consent. And a practice has ownership of its data and who owns data and where it goes. And I think that is sometimes forgotten when we talk to people who suddenly arrive in healthcare and think they can solve an interoperability problem because they solved it because in Xero you could press one click and start sending all your accounts payable and no one cared where your data went and where it landed and everything like that. Healthcare isn't like that. Our fabulous practices and specialists and everyone like that want to know what's happening to their data. So it's great to have the infrastructure in place, but you also need the interface and the consent process to also be nailed.
Yeah.
And on that one, Pete, I think the really important point is it is about coexistence, because would we all love to have these beautiful standardized APIs today that everyone can connect to? Yeah, sure. But we have a plethora of software in this industry that's at different maturity levels and ability and flexibility to be able to move quickly versus move slow. So we're at a point where we need to offer and start moving towards incrementally where we want to be in the future. But that does mean that there'll be a period of time where there's still systems using older standard ways to connect and bespoke integrations. And it's how do we, as an industry, offer a platform that allows them to connect in and offer those different connectivity with a backwards compatibility while we bring others along that journey as well. And I think that's the core focus of where we should be, not how do we get interoperability? How do we support each other to integrate in this current hybrid world to move towards that end goal? I also just want to be very clear, while I am absolutely an advocate for Spire, I am on the Sparked, I am on that train, I've been there for a decade. Spire has use cases for some connectivity, but it is not the be-all and end-all standard for absolutely every integration. I think we need to be very clear that there will still be integrations that connect in different ways. Again, how do we agree to that as an industry and let those connections happen? Sorry, just want to jump in.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that ties it. Yeah, I was going to throw to you, Kaye, because I know that.
Thanks, Pete. Yeah. Sorry, jumping in as well too. And I think, look, standards is the key word there. We need to adopt standards that people can adhere to, that we also need to support people in their adoption of them as well too, because it's one thing, as you say, Danielle, that we say or we impose this standard and everybody must adhere, unless we give people some sort of roadmap as to how they can comply with that standard. Well, then we're not going to get adoption, and fundamentally, we're not going to achieve that interoperability that we want. I shared an example that we had to work on recently with the NHS mandated that the discharge summaries had to adopt the PRSB standard and be issued as fire bundles, which most of the receiving systems in the NHS ecosystem could not receive. So it's like bringing everybody along on the journey at the same time, so that we're not prohibiting that sharing of information. We're actually working out a way that, yes, while we're advancing, while we're adhering to standards, but we're also keeping everybody in touch and connected, rather than disadvantaging potentially some sectors of the health sector because they can't maintain the pace that's needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess building on that, Phil, you'd see that I was going to say almost the other way, being like a global EMR provider and then localizing it for our region. There's always going to be this need for, I guess, there's going to be standards everywhere, and we're never going to be on, like, to have an expectation of like, this is just how we do things and that's it. Like, but there's a lot we can do to be able to connect.
Yeah. So I totally agree. I'm in vehement agreement with my other colleagues here on the panel, and I would agree. So I guess what I would think is that we need to think a little bit more holistically as a group. And I think there's some messages to everybody on this on the panel, and I think also in the audience, right? And there's probably two different views of why we've had so many challenges, at least in my mind, right? And so, yes, we need to try and have standards. Yes, we need to try to standardize. Yes, there's going to be some local variations. Some systems will support, some won't. But we also have to think about that, hospitals and practice management practices may have devices from 20 years ago that are working perfectly well, but aren't going to pick up the fire standard overnight. Or to Danielle's point, there's some use cases where the push of an HL7v2 message makes sense versus, a RESTful service. Not that you can't do that in fire, but if you are a CIO or, an owner of a practice, why would I spend money to change over to a new standard to get the same outcome that I've already implemented or that I already have today? Maybe I don't keep doing that for new things, but why would I want to spend money to go change that right now? And so I think I'll get back to that thought process. My 2 messages out here for the people that are purchasing and using these systems, I would say there needs to be a lot more thought process in your business cases and your enterprise architecture around the integration points. And sometimes that may mean that you need to have some conversations with your vendor who may try to compete, successfully or not in the ultimate tender, but you need to have discussions with your vendor around how easy, how unique is it? What are the costs? What are the implications of some of those things? Because, Kaye's point's absolutely right earlier on. We can go do it. I have a fantastic interface team. Kaye has a fantastic interface team. Danielle and Chris have fantastic interface platforms, right? It can be done. Is it going to be as cheaply or for free or at the cost or with the implication that you want? Maybe not, right? So to the sites, to the practices, I'd say, don't treat us only as, you can't talk with us before you do a tender, and then only what tender requirements that you've come up with. That's all we're stuck responding to, because sometimes that's not a great solution for anyone, right? So have those conversations. But I also think for the vendors on the call, we also need to not to bash each other. We have to recognize that, what are the implications? Who's the actual user or the decision maker in, some of these sessions? And so I've said multiple times, I cannot make one of my clients turn on a certain piece of functionality. And so oftentimes when I have somebody coming and saying, let's partner, my answer is yes, let's partner, but let's find that site who will do that work with us, right? Because it's no good to create something. Yes, we can create something in isolation, but that's not really the useful piece. The really useful piece is a clinician or patient or the ultimate end user actually getting that value. And we need to find that, because if we can't find anybody that wants to turn that on, to use it, to get the value of it, we've probably all wasted our time, right?
Yeah.
I love you, Phil. I wish
Yeah.
I could have little kind of snippets of Phil's voice of reason for when things go crazy within this industry. Phil can kind of provide us with some rational thinking, because that made a lot of sense to me. And I've had a lot of these conversations, and everyone here on this virtual thing, I know we've been in a lot of conversations at every level, up at the at a government side, right down through to a vendor conversation. And I think also, as Jody kind of re-emphasized in the chat there too, that throughout the process, throughout that, the co-design piece, it's a buzzword we throw around a lot, but it's talking to people. Like, have those conversations and let's not be jerks about it, if I'm going to be really crass, because I think there are commercial requirements and there's competition. But I know, like, a lot of us, all of us out here on this, also members of the Medical Software Industry Association, and there are other bodies and partnership groups, ways for the ecosystem to connect. I encourage everyone to take part of that. And there are people on different levels of that journey too. And someone mentioned earlier, there are some great tools being built from within clinics because they solve particular workflows and they have a really good use case. And usually they come out of someone's need, and then it's like, hey, this could benefit more clinicians. And that's amazing. And we need that platform to be able to do that. I was drawn to David's comment too, because he brought up this point around the needs of consumers and communities. Because one thing I find in this conversation, because we're vendors when we put this hat on, and a lot of it is that, yes, there's the technology discussion, but there's also the broader kind of ecosystem place. But where does the consumer kind of fit into all of this? And are there actual, real examples anyone on the panel can talk about, hey, by having this capability, then it's resulted in better outcomes for patients? I don't like to throw into the open crowd here because
I can.
I'm happy to go.
Because Phil already had a turn. Danielle's going to go, and then Phil can, if he gets time.
Yeah. So I would like to bring up a couple. So One really classic example of how we approached this and the consumer outcomes was e-prescribing. And I think that's a really important one that we acknowledge. As an industry, we came together during COVID. We looked at how we could actually bring a system to life that allowed patients to be able to actually order their prescriptions via an SMS, something we've been trying to do for over a decade. The reality is is it the perfect way that we wanted to do it? No. Did it come together really well and give positive outcomes for patients? Absolutely. So I think in terms of working towards a standard approach of how we actually integrate, how we deliver that system, how we actually design it around a patient need, that was an area that needed to improve. Now that that's done, we're now looking at ways that we can do that for the next piece. So touching on to Phil's point, it's not about trying to re-engineer and rebuild what we have today. I don't think we need to do anything to e-prescribing right now. It works as a function. There's still additional functionality to add to it. But what I mean by that is we're now, as an industry, focused on e-requesting. So e-ordering traditionally hasn't necessarily been across the board. There's different ways it's done. It's not always easily accessible or identifiable from a consumer's perspective on how do I book the appointment? Where do I book the appointment? How do I know they have the service? So we're looking at that through the sparked perspective of how do we actually come together and solve a real world issue at the moment of e-ordering and improve that for the consumer, but build it and design it around a consumer and improve that process as a workflow. So I think we're actually starting to get better at, yes, we have this end result that we really want to get to, but let's look at the individual use cases that could be improved on today and incrementally work on those.
Love it. Sorry, I heard other examples there. I'll give the
Yep.
chance. Yeah, Kaye.
I feel like we much and all as I would never endorse Teams. It's frustrating, but I feel like I need to have put my hand up sort of option because we've all got so much to say, Pete, and you're doing a great job moderating. I was going to maybe use the example in terms of how we engaging with consumers of remote patient monitoring and the devices that are available now in terms of we're using Bluetooth connectivity to pull in that, whether it's a blood pressure cuff, whether it's a diabetes monitor and things like that to support virtual care. And so it's actually engaging the patient actively in their care, using the technology that's available, using the interoperability that's available in quite a streamlined way and getting that data immediately to the clinicians so that they can give the best possible care to the patient. At the patient's convenience, which I think is one of the key things here, they can receive this care wherever they are, and they don't need to have that sort of impost of having to travel to wherever their care provider is. But it's I think something again that perhaps started a little bit through COVID. I'm somewhat disappointed that it hasn't maintained that momentum, or at least that's my perception, and that it's something that we really could see as a growth area going forward with the technology that's available to us.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yes, Mike. Phil.
Well, I was just going to say, I think we're on the cusp of innovation, right? So I think when we think of the consumer applications, some of the challenges that we've already kind of talked about have always existed, right? That one by one implementation is quite expensive and it's varied. It's not the same. And how do you create a business? If you're trying to, even if you have a great consumer app idea, how do you create a business of it? Because not everybody had portals. Still today, not everybody has a portal, especially here in Australia, right? But I think we're at the cusp of that because creating these standards like FHIR, again, creates that floor. And I think the initial thought process when most people were thinking about FHIR, they were like, I need to have access to my information. I need to maybe provide access to transfer of care or for patients, clinicians within a hospital to see it. But, we've extended our FHIR platform into our portal as part of the consumer framework. And we're seeing some really amazing consumer apps popping up. Things like surgical valets. So, maybe you're doing elective surgery. How do I walk you through that process? For the hospital, they do thousands of surgeries a day, hundreds of surgeries a day, maybe not thousands, but hundreds. It's day in, day out. They're used to it. But me as a patient, I've never had a surgery, right? What do I expect? What are the next steps? Are things on time? Are they not? I may be worried, or I may have a cure that needs to help and plan some of those things. And so, those concepts of valet are new views of your medication list, and how do you show what doses you take at which times and what are the contraindications, and there's so many of these kinds of apps that are starting to pop up that because we finally got a floor that could cross multiple systems a lot easier, then these great ideas from a consumer perspective can actually become viable businesses or get big enough. Because I think most of us hope that even if we do have portals, even if we do have apps, that we're not sick enough to need to use them every day, right? There will be some population that uses them a lot, but you need to have some of that consistency across facilities and practices and those kinds of things. And so there's a lot of apps that are starting to pop up that attempt to do that. But they could only do that because we started going down this standards process, right? And that's just really getting going in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. That's at a private vendor level, right down clinic level, right up through to government, federal, state level. Everyone's got there's a lot of front doors in healthcare. So that's an interesting one in itself. But as we hit time on this session, I don't even reckon we've got time for everyone to give a final thought, but I know this won't be the last time we speak on the Talking HealthTech podcast, that's for sure. I encourage all the attendees to hang around in the chat because there'll be more discussion, which is, I guess, building on this discussion around interoperability. And I can see those thoughts already coming through the chat. So I'm going to have to leave it there. Phil, Chris, Kaye, Danielle, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Talking Health Tech. Make sure you like and subscribe and share this episode with someone who might find it valuable. For more information and resources about healthcare innovation, visit talkinghealthtech.com.